Well, I'm terrific, actually, for lots of reasons. How about you?
I think so far this year has been favorable for me personally, but there's still a long journey left. But thank you so much for jumping on and taking the time to connect and kind of share your story.
My pleasure. It's like most people, I enjoy talking about myself, and and you give me an excuse to do that.
Well, I'd like to start, and I thought about several different ways on how I can make an introduction. But quite honestly, I could sit here for 5 minutes just kind of sharing all of your accolades and your hardware that you have stored, and our audience is full of Penn Staters and fans, and I think they would just kind of they would appreciate starting right from the beginning, kind of how you grew up and perhaps what led you to Penn State. So I'd love to get the full spectrum of where you started off.
I can do that. I I can actually remember that far back. I grew up in Monroeville and Pitcairn, two little towns near Pittsburgh, and it was an all-American upbringing with great parents and Little League baseball and backyards and two little brothers, and we went from football season to basketball season to baseball season, and I had some luck at Gateway High School where I was one of the cool kids, I think, and played a little ball and did a little acting and was lucky to be president of my class. And I was headed to West Point, and it was a sort of an all-American kid's dream. The summer before I was to leave for college, to leave for West Point, I went for my final physical, and they discovered something wrong with my back. And I said, I've never had any back problems. I can't be. I played 5 high school sports, and they said, well, it's something that may pop up when you're 50, so we can't accept you. And I hadn't applied to any other schools, and my life journey had suddenly been interrupted. It was written in stone, and now there was an eraser out there erasing that dream. And I ended up at Penn State, and I think, quite frankly, I went there because I thought maybe by going to Penn State, I could then transfer to the Air Force Academy or somewhere that would take me in that direction of becoming a general. But my first day on campus, I happened to wander into the Playhouse and saw up on the board a casting notice. Now, I had, among all those other things, had done a lot of acting as a kid through school and had a little acting bug there for a while. And I thought, well, Joe Paterno probably is not interested in a 5'4" quarterback. Maybe I'll go back to that acting dream I once had. And I auditioned for a play, a main stage production, and I got cast in it. And I just fell in love with theater all over again. And I thought, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. I love that feeling of storytelling and being on stage and hearing people laugh and clap. And I got the theater bug. Now, I didn't have the guts to tell my dad I was going to be an acting major. So I got as close as I could by getting into the broadcasting department. I really wasn't a TV kid, really had no dreams of making television shows, didn't know much about it, but it sounded like a little more legitimate course of study. And I spent most of my time in the theater department, most of my time acting, and had a great time at Penn State and for many reasons. But my final year, my final broadcasting class was to put on a television show. And we were divided into little groups. We all had to do one little show. And I was the producer, I think, of my group. And we decided on following this group of students who were doing something. They were I'm not sure what they were doing. But we filmed them out in their environment, preparing for this program, and the culmination would be a live talk show where they were all sitting around table and talk about this project, and we would roll in the clips we had shot out in the field, and the student who was assigned to direct it put on his headsets, and he said, "All right, we're ready to go. Ready, camera 3, and take 3." And I said, "Whoa, wait a minute! You have to roll tape first, dude." And he said, "Oh, okay." So he got a little flustered and started to panic a bit. And he said, "Okay, here we go. Cue him. No, don't cue him yet. Ready, 1, take 2. No, I don't mean 3. I mean 4. Oh, wait." And I said, "Whoa, let's start this over again." And I said, "In fact, let me try it." And I took the headsets and put them on myself, and I immediately started to bark orders and call cameras and anticipate what might happen next, and very quickly get out what I needed, and if a mistake happened, get by it, because I just had a sense that you can't dwell on a mistake. You got to stay with the action and follow it straight through. And I was relying on all that team of camera operators and audio people, and people were rolling back those videotapes to do this this sort of teamwork effort to capture a talk show. Kept my eye on the clock, and make sure that all the people that were on that panel were covered, just in case somebody jumped in. I could get the shot of that person. When it was over, I thought, man, that was a real adrenaline rush, and I kind of lugged that. And I thought, and you know something, it feels familiar. And I thought, I know what that is. That's like being a quarterback of a football team. And I thought, yeah, I can do this.
That's a really interesting parallel.
And to this very day, I get that same adrenaline rush. I still feel like the quarterback, on a live show, and it translated into a 50-year career.
It's really remarkable. I think, reviewing your accomplishments and where you started and now where you are. But was there any kind of lasting impression from your childhood or from sports or from, what drew you to theater? What drew you to, people have interest in science, people have interest in business. Is there anything from your childhood or from growing up in the Pittsburgh area that set you in that course?
Well, I had great parents who encouraged their 3 boys to do anything they wanted to do, and convinced them that there was nothing that we couldn't do. And in fact, I mentioned being short, but my dad took me aside when I was 8 years old, I think. He said, "Don, listen, I got to tell you something. You're probably going to be short. I'm short. Your mom's really short, and that's the way it's going to be. But I have to tell you something. You have no idea how lucky you are, because for some reason the teachers, they call on the tall kids first, and the coaches, they put the big kids in the game first. But when they find out you know the answers, they find out you can throw as far and run as fast, maybe faster than those big kids, they will be doubly impressed. So you've got that advantage right off the bat, that they don't expect as much out of you. And when you overcome, or when you reach beyond those expectations, they'll be super impressed." And I think that was the best advice I ever got in life. And I have followed through with that, and have had no Napoleon complex, and feel like, yeah, I've got a little secret that will help me overcome anything. And yeah, my parents were also comfortable talking in front of groups, and they encouraged me to do that. And I always had a sense of show business and a love for storytelling, and that sense of making people laugh and clap has carried through my entire career.
Yeah. I grew up with kind of a musical family of sorts, and I think that cultivation of interest transcends your whole life. I think it really just defines who you become, what you're interested in. I mean, I listen to music that my friends don't even know who these people are, just because of the influence that I had from my parents. So I certainly appreciate and know where you're coming from as it relates to kind of shaping your life based on those experiences.
I couldn't agree more. The parallels are perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So, take me back for a brief moment to your time at Penn State, and you know, I graduated in 2011. I can't imagine the campus. I know for a fact that the campus looked and felt a lot different when I was there. But what was the life like there? And can you paint a picture on kind of a typical fall day at Penn State in 1969?
Well, I think it wasn't called Penn State then. I think it was called Penn Colony. That was a long time ago. But I found it warm and receptive and open in ways that, as I said, allowed anybody in the university to audition for a major production. I'm not sure it's the same way now. That it still has a remarkable reputation. That theater department, especially the musical theater department, is really strong. So they may not be as open to letting anybody come in and audition. But they also had a thing called every Thursday they would do student productions written by students and acted by students and directed by students and what was it called? At any rate, it was a great program that allowed experimentation. There were some really, really fine faculty in that department, and also in the broadcasting department too. I mean, in retrospect, I know that I got a solid background in broadcasting and broadcasting production because there were just good people there, and they were a faculty that cared more about students and about tenure, and I loved my time at Penn State. I also discovered that I was a pretty good writer. There were 3 professors accused me of plagiarism, and they were wrong. And I came out of all of those thinking, okay, maybe I have something to offer there. I got a chance to play for Joe Paterno. Now, the fact is, it was a charity game between the disc jockeys of WDFM. No, there was a local radio station where I worked on weekends. We played the state police in a flag ball charity game, and we won, by the way. And Paterno coached us, and Rip Engel coached the cops. And it was I happened to make a catch, scored, came off the field, and Paterno said, "Hey, nice catch, son." Man, that felt better than any Emmy. That's in my autobiography for sure.
Wow.
I believe that in some ways I didn't take advantage of some of the things that Penn State had to offer. And I tell kids this all the time, that when you have an opportunity, and if you're interested in broadcasting or journalism, learn as much as you can about as many different things as you can. I had a chance to take electives, and I could have taken a little bit of economics or philosophy or theology and learn a little more about the world. Instead, I took things that came easily to me, makeup for television, and in retrospect, I would have been a better producer, a better director, a better writer if I had. We had a language requirement, and I took Spanish, and I certainly phoned my way through that. And I thought, well, I'm certainly not going to work in Spanish television or Spanish theater. I'm not going to need this skill set at all. Right. And I brushed it off. My first 4 jobs all had some Spanish connection. If I had known Spanish, I would have been better at those first 4 jobs. And so I didn't take advantage of what everything that was there, and I wish I had.
Well, it's certainly, I mean, there's so many things that you could take advantage of, and me personally, I took advantage of the newspaper, and I would encourage, just as you said, to take advantage of these things that are available to you and try to just learn. It's so easy to learn things today with the internet.
Absolutely.
I can't imagine, what the the resources that you had and now the resources that you have currently to learn on the fly. It's just it's a different time, obviously, but I guess it was a little bit more easy to kind of understand what you want to accomplish. There were only so many routes you could take, and I'm curious how you said that your first couple jobs had a Spanish kind of characteristic to it. How did that kind of transform from student to professional?
When I graduated, I did not have the guts to move to New York and be a struggling actor. And I thought, well, I've discovered this little side skill, this affinity for directing live television. Maybe I can put that to use. And I really, in the back of my mind, thought maybe I can be a television performer of some sort. But that side skill got more and more valuable to me, and I became more and more a behind-the-scenes director than an on-camera performer, and ended up with 52 years of directing television. But the best thing that happened at Penn State in career-wise is the summer before my senior year, I got an internship at KDKA TV in Pittsburgh, KDKA TV and radio. And it was a great internship where every week I was in a different department. And I got to learn how a station runs, a little bit about television news, a little bit about the promotion department, the advertising department, the sales department, and it was really valuable. Now that was and is a big time local station, fully unionized, but they were flexible enough that I could occasionally raise my hand and say, "Hey, could I try that?" or could I write something? And they often said, "Yeah, sure." In fact, one Saturday I was in television news, and they ran out of reporters, and they got a call that there had been a robbery on the north side, and they looked around and they had no reporters left. They'd all sent them all out to cover other stories, and they said, "Hey, intern, come here, take this camera crew and go over to that robbery and get whatever you can, interview people, find out the story, and bring it back." Well, it turned out to be a great story. There was a little twist to it at the end. And I was an intern who actually covered a story for KDKA News. And it was thrilling, great experience, and great opportunity. And the following week, I was in radio, and they were writing promos. I was in radio promotion. They were writing promotional announcements for the disc jockeys. And I said, "Can I write a couple?" And they said, "Oh, give it a shot." Well, I wrote 4 or 5 that they accepted. And there I was sitting with these disc jockeys that I'd listened to growing up all my whole life, and I was giving them notes, and they were reading my copy, and I got to record my promos and hear them on the air of KDKA Radio. The only week that was less than demanding was a week I was in television promotion, and they were promoting the new fall season for CBS. And they had hired a jingle writer and some dancers and a choreographer, and they were going to do these little 1-minute songs about the new shows out in Pittsburgh landmarks. And the day before production started, we had a big meeting, and the production manager said, "Does anybody here drive a stick shift?" And I raised my hand. He said, "Oh, yeah, I can do that." He said, "Oh, good, because we rented a camper, and it's not an automatic. It's got standard transmission, and we have nobody here knows how to drive a stick shift." I said, "Oh, sure, I'll do that." So I spent that whole week driving this little camper around town, and I couldn't even go on set. I had to sit out in the parking lot to protect the camper, and every once in a while take a case of Cokes into the dancers, but I didn't even get to watch the productions. So I at the end of that week, I thought, well, I kind of wasted my time there. I spent most of it sitting in that camper. But when the rest of the internship was so good, when it was over, I went up to the production manager. I said, "Give me some advice. I would love to work here someday in production. Tell me what do you think I should do?" He said, "Well, this is a pretty big station, so get a job in a smaller station somewhere. Take advantage of whatever they have. Learn to do as many different jobs as you can. And when you've got some experience under your belt, give me a call." Well, I followed his advice, and when I graduated, I got my first job right away at WPSX then, WPSU now, the educational station attached to Penn State. And sure enough, 2 weeks, I was hired to be the assistant to the director, and 2 weeks into the job, he quit, and he moved to Philadelphia. And the executive producer of this series of music and art that we were working on said, "Oh man, I've got this vacation I'm going on. You do whatever you can to just clean up what he's done so far. Whatever you saw him getting working on, do what you can. When I get back, I'll find another director." Well, I said, "This is my chance," and I spent those 2 weeks and did everything I could to put together what he had done, to follow through, to finish some of the interviews and some of the shows, do some of the editing. And when the guy came back, he said, "Hey, this is great, man." He said, "I'll tell you what, I'll give you the job if you want it." Well, so I was a director 2 weeks into my career.
Wow.
And I wasn't great at it, but I learned what I had to know about 30 seconds before I had to know it. And I was a good enough actor to pretend like I knew what I was doing. And that worked out. I after about 8 months, I said, "I think I'm ready to move on." And not yet to KDKA, but I went to a little tiny UHF station in San Jose, California. Probably one of the worst stations in the country. Just tiny little thing. I didn't have enough programming to sign on until 3 p.m. Had no newscast, just some syndicated shows and some local things. Local disc jockey came in to do a teenage dance show, and they had Spanish programming all weekend. So I directed Spanish. That was one of the Spanish jobs, and I directed Spanish used car commercials, and I got to do directing and camera work and learned a lot about production. So I gave this guy a call at KDKA. I said, "Hey, I did exactly what you told me to do. In fact, I did more. I got jobs at 2 different stations, and I'm ready to. Do you have anything there at KDKA where you could use a production person?" And he said, "Don King, I'll tell you the truth. I just can't place you." I said, "Well, I'm probably the only intern that ever covered a story. I went out with a camera crew and covered that robbery on the north side." He said, "I'm sorry, we get a lot of interns come through here, and I just can't remember it." I said, I wrote promos for KDKA radio." He said, Don King, wait a minute." He said, are you the kid that drove the stick shift?" I said, yeah, I did that. And for you, for the TV promotion. He said, "You were great at that." He said, "You know something? I tell you what, I do have a job for you. If you want to move back here and just work for the summer, you can be the producer of Pittsburgh Pirate baseball. We only cover 6 or 7 road trips a year, but we need somebody to go with the booth announcers and sit in there with the play-by-play guys, feed them commercials, tell them when they're back from commercial and stuff, and you can do that for the summer." Oh man, before I hung up, I was packed and ready to move back from San Jose to Pittsburgh. Wow. And that led to, they kept me on to do the same thing for Steeler football, for just preseason football. And then they hired me as a full-time director, and I became a producer, and I ended up directing news and directing a weekly magazine show, and I did telethons and documentaries. It was the 3 most important years of my career. And it led immediately to a job as a staff director in New York. And it was all because I could drive a stick shift. Wow.
That is, I mean, I'm one for details and just kind of taking every opportunity, but that seems pretty wild that out of that whole course of action, he remembered the stick shift. And yes. I mean, that to me, it's the things that you don't really think about that have that butterfly effect. And just from you grabbing the headphones and at that Penn State student thing, right. I mean, it's just so profound how that extrapolates into a career. Like every single thing is like a puzzle piece that matches up. And at that point in your career, are you 5, 10, 15 years out or of Penn State, or just a few years?
I was 2.5 years out. 2.5 years out before I went to KDKA. And then I only spent 3 years there and then moved to a local station in New York. And I spent 2 years there and moved to a WCBS, so the O&O station. And from that, another blessing from the fates, I ended up directing a syndicated show called The Mike Douglas Show. which was done in Philadelphia, and it was a big time national show. It was similar to the show Ellen today, that kind of talk show, variety show, and I was way over my head, but it was an incredible experience to do that show, where we had the biggest names in comedy and music, and Mike Douglas his gimmick was he had a co-host every week, one star who would come in and sit through all the shows of the week, and I had co-hosts like Jerry Lewis and Jackie Gleason and John Lennon and John and Yoko co-hosted one week. Wow. And there's a famous shot of Tiger Woods at the age of 3 taking a swing at a golf ball with not Jack Benny, but Bob Hope as the guest. And it's still famous because this tiny little kid clearly has a great swing, and people make reference to that appearance all the time. And I directed that.
What is it like to kind of? I mean, at this point, you are directing some pretty profound productions. It's a national audience. What is it like? I mean, you mentioned adrenaline. What's it like for someone who, how can you explain that to someone who has never put the headphones on, or for someone who, is in a completely different industry, but clearly has an interest in like understanding what that's like? Kind of like asking like, what's it like in space to an astronaut?
Yeah. Well, you've made reference, I made reference, and we both made reference to adrenaline, and that's that sense of butterflies in your stomach, and that sense of this is live, and this could fall apart, and this could there's an intensity and an electricity in the air, and a sense of we're all in this together, and it's happening now as it's happening. There's no chance, there's no opportunity to edit it or change it or rewrite it or make excuses for it. It happens now, and there are people that hate that pressure, and there are other people who thrive on it, and I always had that love of that thrill. When I've done stuff that is pre-taped, even if it is live to tape, there's something missing, and it is that being on the high wire and knowing that you could fall off.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting. There's probably parallels to being a musician and performing live versus in the studio, where you can edit things, and or being an athlete and performing on the field versus at practice. But there is some kind of thrill behind that. So that's cool that you take that energy and bottle it up into that moment. Wow.
And as I said, I still get that same butterflies in the stomach feeling every Saturday night. and I like that. Yeah.
I mean, you've directed so many hours of television, and, they say, to become a master at something, you just have to continually go over and over and practice these things and do them. And I'm sure it's almost second nature at this point in your career. You've directed thousands of hours of television. What was it like to make the transition from, a daytime talk environment into a sketch comedy like SNL, and maybe perhaps share your introduction to SNL and how that transpired?
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. That's exactly what I dwell out on a lot when I reflect on where I am, and when I talk to kids about where to go. As I said, I had this dream, this passion for storytelling, and my career led me toward a very solid and productive and rewarding career directing live, multiple camera television. But it became mostly morning TV. Directed Good Morning America for 7 years, and CBS This Morning for another 14. So it was 21 years of getting up very early but directing a show that was designed to be informative, to let people know that the world didn't blow up overnight, and your sports team won, and here's take an umbrella to work this morning, and here's a little cooking demo and a fashion show that you might be able to take advantage of. We did a lot of live music too, so there was some performance involved, but mostly it was an informative show, and it was not designed to make people laugh and clap and think, and that had been my dream. And after those 21 years, I started to think, I kind of sold out in my dream, because as rewarding as this is, as much as it's still challenging and still fun on many levels, it's not storytelling, and it's not making people laugh and clap. And out of nowhere, a guy I had worked with at NBC on a short-lived talk show I had done between Good Morning America and CBS This Morning. He'd been my associate director, and he had stayed at NBC and gone right to work on Saturday Night Live, and was there for 20 some years. And he called me up in 2006 in the summer. He said, we've only had two directors on this show the entire run, and the woman who's been directing it is quit. She's burned out. She doesn't want to come back. We're in the summer hiatus, and they have not found anybody. Would you be interested in it? And I said, oh, man, Bob, there's no show I would rather direct than Saturday Night Live. However, I've never directed sketch comedy, and that's the bulk of what Saturday Night Live is. I've done every kind of show that Saturday Night Live makes fun of. I can do talk shows and game shows, and I've done hours of news. I can certainly do comedy news. And certainly live music. And I've probably directed more live television than anybody, but I've never staged actors in little one-act plays and shot them in ways that capture the humor. I can't imagine that they would want somebody that didn't have that as their primary skill. And he said, well, just send in your reel. We'll see. And I said, reel? I don't have a reel. A reel is like a resume for a director.
Sure.
Little clips of things they've directed. I said, I've never had to send a reel around. I've been lucky enough to go from job to job. He said, well, you must have tapes of stuff. I said, oh yeah, sure. I have tapes of shows I've done, but they're not cut into a montage or a reel. So he said, well, bring the stuff in here and we'll edit it together. So I took all my tapes into Saturday Night Live, and my friend edited together this little presentation reel. And I guess it was attractive enough that I got a call that some producers wanted to talk to me. Not Lorne Michaels, but some of his people directly underneath him. And I had a great meeting with them, hearing stories about how this amazing show comes together, how quickly it comes together. And I was shocked and had an adrenaline rush just hearing their stories. But it also became clear to me that what they were looking for was somebody that could direct sketch comedy. So I walked out of that meeting saying, boy, it was great to hear all those stories, and I'm great to get that far, but they're certainly not going to give me a call. Well, I took my daughter to Disney World and got a call down there over Labor Day saying, Lorne Michaels wants to talk to you. I said, whoa, that sounds good. I'll be back in town tomorrow. They said, well, then you be here tomorrow. Well, I was there tomorrow and sat in his office, and he talked for a long time about how he hated the possibility that he had to find another director. That maybe it was time for the show to come to an end, and he did not want to go through this transition. And I'm not sure that I said more than 8 words beyond "nice to meet you, Mr. Michaels." But he said at the end, he said, "Oh, wait a minute, you directed the Mike Douglas show, right?" I said, "Yes, I did, a couple of years." He said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, great. It was nice talking to you." Although I'm not sure he even said that. But I walked out thinking once again, boy, it was great to get that far. But it's clear that he wants somebody that can slip right in and do this without a steep learning curve. But they called me the next day and they said, okay, we're going to take a chance on you. We want you to direct the first 3 shows. Beth, who was the director, will sit in the back row and help you through it. But we're only going to give you 3 shows. And I immediately said, what did I just get myself into? I thought, my God, I, yeah, that would be a thrilling show to direct if I knew how to do it. But I'm risking failure here. I mean, I have a job that I'm pretty good at. I haven't felt butterflies in my stomach for a long, long time, and I'm going to step in and potentially fail in front of this high profile audience with a show that is going to be dependent on the director to capture this stuff. And I'm not going to. I won't know how to capture this stuff. And I almost said, no, I don't want to take that risk. I'm too far along in my career. It's not worth that. And then I said, you know something, there's no worse emotion than regret. And, excuse me, sorry about that kid. I said, I know what will happen. I will not do it to play it safe. And then a year from now, I'll say, oh man, maybe I could have done that. Or why didn't I try? Or they hire somebody who's not that good anyhow. And I thought, all right, I'll give it a shot. Yeah, if I fail, I fail, and I can always come back to this kind of work. I know how to do this, but I'm going to stick my neck out. And I am so glad I did. Man, that was 15 years ago, and it's been by far the best 15 years of my career, by far. Yeah, it was a steep learning curve, and there were times when I said, I do not know how to do this.
Yeah.
And there's still times when I say that because it's an amazing operation, and I'm still amazed that it gets done the way it is done every single week in just 4 days from the first word to the fade to black at the end. 4 days. It is an amazing operation, but it also is so rewarding, and it does make people laugh and clap and think. And in the past couple of years, even more important, I think, we've held people accountable, and we've done some healing for the whole country. And it feels like this is I was blessed to get a chance to be a part of this team, and I'm so glad I took the risk.
Yeah, I mean that it certainly paid off, and I can't imagine the feeling, and I mean just to wrap your head around. There's no other. I mean, to only have two other prior directors. There's not many companies and businesses in the whole country that did that few hiring for a specific role. So like there was a lot of pressure on that hire, and for both Lorne and the staff and everyone, like it was fight or flight.
It was a big risk. You're absolutely right. Now there's very little turnover of that show in general. First of all, as you suggested, there's no other show like it. So people who are good at it and people who are fast at it, from the hair and makeup people, the set designers and the wardrobe people and special effects people and prop people, stagehands, best at what they do. And so they get there, and it's a cool place to be, and it's so rewarding. And we only do 21 shows a year, so no people come and stay, and there's very little turnover.
Yeah,
and I'm not willing to turn over myself.
Well, if you could just briefly, I know the audience would love to understand kind of what the complexities of a week, kind of in the driver's seat from the start to the fade to black, right. From a high level or however specific you'd love to get. I'd love to kind of get a sense of the construct of that.
It's a little different in COVID time, but the basic schedule used to be we would do nothing until late Monday, where we would have a short meeting in Lorne's office. Just the writers and a couple of us would meet with a host. And if that host was somebody who's never hosted before, could be a big athlete or a rapper or a movie star. But we would just go around the room, and each writer would throw out one idea for a potential sketch. Now, very few of those ideas ever evolve into actual sketches. I think that meeting is designed to just sort of scare the host into thinking, oh my God, he wants me to do an impression of Edgar Bergen, and she wants me to play a 3-year-old girl in a beauty pageant. And it's designed also to feel out the host and get some input from him or her about impression she can do, or whether she can sing or not. And it just starting Monday night. Tuesday, we do nothing at all. The writers come in late in the evening and then write all through the night. And then Wednesday, I show up and on my desk are 40 sketches, 40 complete scripts. And then we, starting at about 4 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, we sit in a big room where the cast and Lauren and I sit around a table and read through those 40 sketches, script in hand, along with the host and the cast. And it takes hours to do that. And at 8 o'clock or so, Lauren will go into his office and whittle those 40 down to the actual 10 or 11 that we're actually going to mount. And then when those selections are made, I take those selected scripts into a different room, and for the first time, Wednesday night, turn over the selected sketches to the wardrobe people and the hair and makeup people and the set designers and the lighting people and the special effects people. They start from scratch Wednesday night at sending out to gather props and to design special costumes and trap doors in sets that they. We come in Saturday and rehearse the guest band, and it's just a sound check, and I run cameras for 2 passes each of their songs, and then we do some promotional announcements, and then we rehearse the easy sketches, maybe 4 or 5 sketches that don't need much scenery or don't need any special props, so we can do with rehearsal blocks and just some random flats and chairs and just to get the basic blocking down. And I'll go in the control room and rehearse that sketch that's now mounted and staged and blocked. I'll rehearse that with the cameras to get some rough camera choreography set. We come back in Friday, and now we have a little more to work with. So the more complex sketches, we have some stuff to rehearse with. Do all the rest of the sketches. Each gets about an hour and a half to block and rehearse. And come back in Saturday, and now that entire studio is filled with props and scenery, and the floors painted, and all of the special effects are there. And then we go through every sketch again, now in full costume and makeup, and working with all of the props and scenery, and the lighting gets tweaked. And that takes most of Saturday until we get to about 5 o'clock, break for a quick meal. The band comes back, the guest band comes back and does another sound check. When we rehearse, come back from that meal, rehearse a weekend update for the first time. And then we rehearse. Sometimes we don't do the cold open until then. Then we bring in an audience and do a full dress rehearsal at 8 o'clock. Now that dress rehearsal is done just like a regular show. We don't start and stop. The cast is trying to sell those sketches because we go in with as many as 40 minutes more material than we need, and several of those sketches won't make it to air.
Wow.
Lauren will say, that we have too much anyhow, so let's get rid of those 3 sketches. But that dress rehearsal will end about 10 o'clock, 10:15. And then 10:30, I get called up to a meeting where Lauren has now rearranged the entire show, thrown out 3 or 4 sketches, and then brings in the writers one at a time to talk a little bit about what changes he has made and what they have made on the sketches that we've just rehearsed and what we've just done in a dress rehearsal. I go down to 11 o'clock with my script now has 100 Post-its in it, and every Post-it is a change in a script. And I'll turn the page, and the whole page will be crossed out, and I'll turn the page, and it'll be new lines handwritten in here, new jokes written in here. I'll turn the page, it'll be a new ending. I'll say, wait a minute, how are we going to do that? There'll be characters that have been killed entirely from his sketch. He'll sometimes recast a sketch because an actor can't make the change to the next sketch in time, so that he brings in one of the other cast members to fill in that hole. And he's never rehearsed it at all, but he's going to do it. And on all of those changes at the same time are going to cue cards, where they're doing multiple cue cards and I run down at 11 o'clock, have a meeting with the camera operators in the control room, and I am frantically trying to get. I've blocked this show shot by shot, number by number, and camera 2 knows it. He's got shot 42, and it's a single of Kate, and then he's on cue. He'll pan over to Cecily, but then I say, wait a minute, kill that shot entirely. That shot that we killed those lines, and camera 4 get us. Well, wait a minute, he's not even in the sketch anymore. Forget that shot too. And I'm panic stricken, trying my best to get this very clear cut, tightly designed show unraveled and re-raveled again. And most of the time I'm cursing Lauren under my breath for putting us through this, for going into 20 minutes more material than we need. And then at 11:30 we fly, and that airplane takes off, and sometimes the trip is bumpy, but we managed to land it at 1 o'clock. And of course, at 1 o'clock, I inevitably say, Lauren was right. That sketch played better after Weekend Update, and that new line, that new ending, got a big laugh. He was right about that, and that new cast member did great. So I just happen to work for a brilliant man who just has an innate sense of what works and what doesn't, and how to mold that show together. And he is driven. I've never known anybody who refuses to coast. He will not coast. Every week his stomach is tied in a knot because he insists that it be the best it can be. And so because of him, that show is still alive and still viable and still newsworthy. And I heard him say a couple of years ago, if that show ever becomes a nostalgia show that people watch because we used to watch that in college, let's see what they're doing now. It wasn't not as funny as it was in the 80s, but they're still at it. He said if it becomes that, he'll stop. He wants it to offend people and hold people accountable to this week just exactly the same way he did last week. And so I have great respect for that, and I get the thrill of being a part of that because of him.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing else like it in the world, and to be a part of it is such an honor, I think, and to, I mean, what's the personality like of all the staff and cast and the team? I mean, you have to have some kind of like persistence, and it's not built for anybody. So, I mean, is there any
That's
type
right.
of?
That's right. When I first started, I thought, man, these people are so talented and such self-starters. They're so good at what they do. I'll bet there's a lot of ego issues and friction. And there is some friction. The set designer is furious because the lighting designer refuses to light this shiny wallpaper he brought in or something. And the two of them are brilliant Emmy-winning artists, and they're clashing about whether one has the right to put in shiny wallpaper. But if the other one can say, that's what Lauren wants, that shuts down the friction. And it's the same way with a cast. They fight for airtime, and they want their sketches to get picked from dress rehearsal to air, or get picked up to be done at all. But they understand, as I do, that it's Lauren's vision that counts here. So all of those egos sort of get squashed by the fact that it's his vision that we're there to see through, and that keeps it cooler. What's even more cool is that it's just a cool place to be. And hosts who come in, I thought, I'm going to have some issues with. These are big time famous people, but I discovered most of them are big time in what they do, but they're fish out of water with us. And so they're saying, please help me, just hold my hand through all of this. And that's a thrill too, to see them out of their element, and to see these remarkably famous people, successful people with a little bit of anxiety. But they too, none of them ever say, we don't have to rehearse that again. I know what I'm doing, or I hosted before. I know how to read cue cards. No, I don't want to do it again. There's none of that. It's just a cool place to be, and the end product is worth it.
Speaking of hosts, you mentioned everyone is there to basically get the job done. Is there any other kind of common denominator that you notice from host to host or year over year, or is everyone kind of unique and they have their own little?
The answer to that question is both.
Okay.
The common denominator is what I said before, that there seems to be just a willingness to try, we're all in this together, and it's going to happen so fast, and we all want to help each other, and we know that everybody's good at what they do, so let's get in and do the best we can. There's very, very little friction. But I will tell a story on it if you have time for another story.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. My very first year, the fourth show I did was hosted by Alec Baldwin. He has hosted more than anybody else, and for a good reason. He's just great at it, and he helps with the writing, and he's smart, and he can do characters and impressions, and can even sing a little bit, and he's really good. And when that show was over, people said to me, "Man, that was by far the best show you've had, man. That's the one you should submit for an Emmy." And I felt pretty good about it too. It went smoothly, and it was certainly the best of my four. Now, I noticed that there was sort of a pall, a cloud over the entire operation as we started to talk about the following week. The host and musical guest was a guy named Chris Bridges, also known as the rapper Ludacris. And people seem to be thinking and saying out loud, man, after this great week with Alec Baldwin, we're going to have this young, inexperienced kid come in. He's 23 years old, never done anything, got no acting experience that we know of. He may come in with a chip on his shoulder, and he's already been in this big national argument with Oprah about the nature of his lyrics. And he may be coming with an entourage, and then we'll be sorry after this great week we've had. Well, I didn't know any better, but I thought, well, I'll look out for it. We come into that Monday meeting. He was very quiet. He seemed to nod a couple of sketch ideas, but said nothing. Came in on Wednesday for the read-through, and he read fine, but he certainly didn't bring much to any of those characters and any of those sketches. He's reading them cold anyhow. Came in Thursday, and we rehearsed his music, and he knows how to do that. It was relatively tame and tasteful, and so we then went into the rehearsal for the first sketch, and cue cards weren't even ready, and it was a round table talk show, and we didn't have any scenery or such. We just had the semicircles chairs, and the nature of the sketch was he appeared as a guest late in the show, and it started off with other cast members answering questions from the host. Now, right off the bat, cast was bouncing off the wall with characters and making the crew laugh, and it was like a typical rehearsal. And Kenan Thompson did something that just brought the whole house down. In his first line, maybe his first word, because he is brilliant and underrated, even though he's highly rated. He's underrated. He is so good at it. But I looked over at Ludacris, and he was sitting there in his chair with his script, and it was shaking like this. And I thought, uh-oh, I think we're in trouble here. This kid might be on something, man. He's really shaking. Well, it circled around to his first line, and that deep baritone voice of his came out with a little quiver in it. I thought, wait a minute. He's not on something. He's nervous. Who wouldn't be nervous? I'd be nervous too. You're sitting there with the best sketch actors in the world. They're already bouncing off the wall with full-blown characters. And I've got to come up with a line reading here, and I don't know what I'm doing. Well, I felt so sorry for him, but from that point on, he worked harder than any host we've ever had. He was the first. We usually bring the host out last because he's in almost every sketch, and so we finish one, we send him back to his dressing room, let him relax some, and then once everybody else is out for the next sketch, then bring him out. He was the first one on set for every single sketch we rehearsed. He had taken notes on his script and asked questions about where the cue card's going to be, and can I move at any point here, and can I? And he was just desperate to make it work. Well, it's not a very forgiving system to a late starter. So by the time we got to dress rehearsal, he was still struggling a little bit, and having trouble, stumbling over some words, and having trouble not knowing quite where the cue cards were, and I dress rehearsal was a little rough. And so dress rehearsal ended, and I stood up in the control room. I said, "Well, maybe I can help. I'm the director. I didn't know any better then." And I ran out of the control room and went to the studio door just as he was coming out of the studio, headed toward his dressing room. And I said, "Hey, Chris, I got to tell you something, man. You come so far in 2.5 days, and you really impressed me." Well, he looked up and down the hall to see if anybody else was around, and he kind of grabbed me by the lapels and sort of pushed me against the wall. And he said, "Thank you so much for telling me that, man." He said, "I had no idea what I was getting myself into. This is so hard." He said, but hearing that from the director helps. Thank you. Well, he went on, and it was like night and day. He was charming and sweet, and he was so much better than anyone ever imagined. And in fact, there were a couple sketches there that are in the archives now, because he did one little thing with Daryl Hammond at the end of the show. The last sketch was two old guys just sitting on a bench talking about life and how things had changed, and it was just charming and sweet. So I was so happy for him, and I got up out of the control room and went into his dressing room to thank him after the show. And now there was an entourage in there, and now
it's over now.
It was all his buddies. There were jackets, shaking hands, moving around. But he saw me and sort of pushed his way through his friends. He came over, shook my hand. He said, "Hey, thanks for talking with me, man, between shows. That really helped." I said, "Oh, you don't have to thank me. You pulled it off, man. You proved me right. That was terrific." And he got quiet again, and he said, "Hey, go tell my mom that, will you?" His mother was standing the other side of the dressing room. He was kind of a straight-laced sort of church lady standing there, and I said, "Hey, your son did great." And she looked down. She said, "Thank you, but you tell me when he doesn't do well too." This hardcore gangster rapper just wanted to make his mom proud.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. I mean, that to me, that shows the amount of respect people have for the show. Like the fact that he followed Alec Baldwin, had all these maybe preconceived notions, and went in and just wanted to do his job the best he could, even though he was frightened.
Yes. Yeah. And that holds for almost every host, no matter who they are. They know that they're out of water, and they know that they better follow the rules and take their guidance and do what they can to not get embarrassed. And I would say 99% of the hosts that we've had have come in that way.
Wow. Well, I have one or two more questions, and this kind of segues well. Such an emotional story. Penn State has the "We Are" kind of phrase. Do you have any kind of personal mantra that you live by? That I mean, clearly it was sharing that moment with Ludacris, and I'm sure that is part of it. But do you have any kind of personal mantra that you prescribe?
Mantra is in a slogan or phrase?
Just words to live by.
Well, my words to live by have more to do with careers in general. And I spend a lot of time talking to students about what they face in their life ambitions. And I think that what I offer is the opportunity to relieve some anxiety. And one of them is, people will tell you that the best way to make a career is to just get your foot in the door. Decide where you want to work and just get your foot in the door. Do anything you can to get that entry-level job. I don't hold to that philosophy. I think that my experience, networks, big operations are filled. The hallways are jammed with young, bright, talented, frustrated kids who got trapped in those entry-level jobs. And they get trapped because the manager who hires them says, "Oh man, we finally found somebody who's good at answering the phones here. We had a couple turkeys in a row, and now we have this woman who's great at it, and everybody likes her. She knows everybody's name. She knows how the system works. Got a great work ethic. She's terrific at it. Now there's a production assistant position opened up, and I would love to move her up to there, but she's never done that before. And if I move her up to there, I have to train her to be a production assistant, and I'll have to find somebody else to answer the phones. I can end up with 2 turkeys in my hands. Why don't I just keep her where she is and find an experienced production assistant from the outside? Experienced PAs are lined up at the door and love to work at SNL. Let's just play it safe here. And those kids get stuck in those entry-level jobs. And so my mantra is find a place where you can get to do the kind of work you want to do the soonest. And it's not going to be a network. It's not going to be Saturday Night Live. It's not going to be a big operation. It's going to be a smaller station, or it's going to be a cable company, or it's going to be something online, or just getting together with your friends to do an online series. Because if you're in that entry-level position and stuck there, what you're getting better at a day-to-day basis is answering the phones. You're not getting better at writing or producing or directing. Go where you can get to do the kind of work you want to do and increase your toolkit and get better at writing or producing or directing or acting. And that's a long mantra, but that's my number one advice.
Yeah. I mean, it's great advice. So everyone listening, especially, I mean, a lot of these listeners are alumni, but I'm encouraging students to listen as well. And I think that's great advice for someone who's soon to be graduating, or just in the beginning of their career. I couldn't say it better myself. And it's interesting. I know you have provided a lot of information, and I know that you've, done a lot of interviews, kind of sharing this information and your story, and it's really interesting. I think that's why you have done a lot, because people find your story fascinating. Have you ever considered writing some kind of book? You mentioned an autobiography, but I'm curious. I mean, you've been behind closed doors for a lot of interesting things, and you offer some steadfast advice. Do you have any aspirations to author a book?
Not yet.
Okay.
It's come up before. I've given it some thought, and I've tried to remember a lot of things I forgot. But not yet.
Okay. I'm just curious. I think our audience at Penn State, the cool thing is about podcasts is they live on forever, and you can now have your story kind of shared in time in different capacities. But I sincerely appreciate the time that you shared, sharing your story and sharing these really interesting kind of contextualized stories. Is there anything kind of unique or interesting about life in New York right now, given COVID, given everything that, how are you spending your time? I know you said that you're kind of SNL's black right now, or dark. So is there anything that you're doing to stay busy?
SNL is dark only because we did 6 shows in a row, and then we were off for a couple, and we did 3 in a row, and off for a big chunk of the vacation period, of the holiday period. But we go back soon to do 5 in a row, and then we have another 6 after that. But things have changed for Saturday Night Live. We have pretty strict COVID protocols that made it much more difficult to do what we do in that same time frame, and nothing has changed in the amount of time we have to do shows. But we do it differently, and quite frankly, I am pretty impressed with, and not surprised, but impressed with how well that team has adapted to those changes and made a show that I think is not compromised. When we first went down in March, and the last 3 shows were canceled, last 5 shows were canceled. I thought that hurts, but we were about to go on our summer hiatus anyhow. It wasn't that big a loss, and by fall things will be back to normal, and we'll get back to doing all of this. And then Lorne Michaels said, we're going to do a couple of remote shows. We're going to pre-tape these the COVID shows. We won't do them in a studio. We won't do them with an audience. We won't do them with a band. We're going to do them individually in homes of the cast. And I thought, what a mistake that is. Man, it will be such a pale representation of what Saturday Night Live is. No audience and no multiple cameras and no special effects and no sets. And they're going to do just these little things with iPhones. It's a mistake. Well, I thought, I'm going to be called a director. I better do something about it. I couldn't be on set with any of these people. I couldn't be with the writers. I couldn't be with the field directors. And so I sent out a long memo about framing and about lighting and miking and thinking that that's the best I can do. And then the first show came in that I had nothing to do with. It was all sent in individually and edited together by the editors and assembled by an associate director. And I didn't see it until it aired, and I thought, that's pretty good stuff. I mean, it's funny and it's Saturday Night Live, and it is topical and valuable. And I was a little shocked. And then the second show was even better. The production values were amazing. And I realized that the field directors we have who go out and do the digital shorts and the pre-tape stuff that we do on a regular basis, commercial parodies and that sort of thing. They're really good at that, and they know how to do it, and that's the way they did these specials. And the cast members all came up, many of whom had done online series and knew a lot about doing their own little sketches and writing them and producing them and directing them and shooting them themselves. Man, the second show, I wrote my second memo saying, I have never been more proud of a show I had nothing to do with. And it was eye-opening in many ways. And I am thrilled that we're back in the studio and we are doing a show that's much more akin to the way it's always been. But it's harder to do. We have fewer people, and we're all wearing masks and shields, and I have to rehearse with stand-ins to block initially, so the cast spends less time on set. And we rehearse with cast wearing masks. Don't really get to see everything. The costume people can't do as much with the cast until we go into dress rehearsal. It's different, and it's slower, and it's harder. But I feel like it's still Saturday Night Live, and it's still worth doing and worth watching.
Yeah,
and I forgot what the question was.
Just kind of like the environment that we're living in.
Oh right, environment. Yeah, New York's environment.
Yeah. I mean, it's remarkable how everybody has pivoted and adapted, and we've had to. It's coming up on a year, and I'm glad to see some sort of semblance of light at the end of the tunnel. And you seem that you're itching to get back to the normal circumstances of SNL. But yeah, I can imagine how different it must be with an audience, like a limited audience, and just kind of everything's moving. But you said before, you're working with the best and brightest in the business. So if there's anyone that can pull it off, it's them.
I agree, and I feel proud of what we've done, and don't think it's been compromised at all. When we first went dark, I said, wait a minute, instead of doing these remote shows, why don't we just do our regular show, except we'll fill the audience with people who have already contracted the virus. I said, they can't make each other any sicker, and they could use the entertainment. Yeah. Apparently the cast and the crew did not see it my way, especially since I knew I would be down the hallway in a locked control room, and so they weren't in favor of my idea. And what resulted instead, I think, was genuine and worthy.
Yeah. Speaking of your control, and this is my last question. I'm I enjoy having a battle station myself. Is there any kind of items that you have that you want to make sure, like a pencil or a water or gum, or is there anything unique to kind of your setup or your ritual for SNL?
I have, and I take great pride in this. I'm responsible for the first pencil sharpener ever to be in the control room, Studio 8H. Beth used one of those mechanical pencils, and she was great at twisting it and putting it down, picking up a dry eraser and erasing, and putting it back down and picking the pencil up again. I couldn't get into that, man. I had to just do the flip and erase, flip back and right, flip. But I went through about 20 pencils every week, every show. So I had to have my pencil sharpener right here. I take great pride in that.
That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I sincerely appreciate you jumping on. I hope I wish this could have been done in person, but given the technology we have, it's great that we were able to be face to face over Zoom. But again, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast, and hopefully you have a great year. There's a lot of time left, and hopefully the rest of it is successful in the sense of SNL and the rest of your year.
Thank you so much, Aaron. This was a pleasure, and I'm thrilled that you're doing this, and think it has some value beyond the pleasure I've taken tonight.